I am Balu Chaturvedula, VP Engineering for Supply Chain at Walmart Global Tech India. I'm excited to introduce the session, Resilient and Sustainable Supply Chain, with an interesting mix of speakers. Our first panelist, Kapil Makija, is a CEO of Unicommerce. He's a seasoned management professional with 14 plus years of experience across e-commerce, management consulting, and technology in both B2B and B2C companies. Kapil possesses a great exposure in a startup environment with significant experience of working with SMEs in India. Our next panelist is Rama Iyer, who leads innovation at GMR Group, a business and a technology leader with 20 years of experience, which includes running incubators, creating global and strategic relationships, advising venture funds, startups, due diligence, and setting up engineering teams. Rama led Innovation Charter for India's best-known ecosystem brand T-Hub and charting the course for its 2.0 foray. Our next panelist is Rajiv Bhuta, who is the Vice President of Product Management at Walmart Global Tech India, focusing on supply chain digital solutions. Rajiv and his team work on building out Walmart's supply chain platforms, enabling multiple Walmart markets to provide a differentiated customer experience. Prior to Walmart, Rajiv has worked at Flipkart in different product leadership roles in supply chain, customer service, and affordability. Rajiv has also worked in the enterprise software space at i2 Technologies, now Blue Yonder, and led consulting and product management, helping enterprise companies in their supply chain transformation journey. And our next panelist, Sanjeev Mehta, who leads product at Udaan. With over 26 years of experience in technology, Sanjeev began his career at TCS as a system engineer, and today he leads product at Udaan. In his career, he has worked at several organizations like Flipkart, SAP Labs, and Cognizant in senior leadership roles. And our final panelist, Santosh Desai, is the CTO at Blowhorn. He's a computer scientist, technology enthusiast, entrepreneur, seasoned architect with experience in building internet scale platforms in supply chain and logistics. Prior to Blowhorn, Santosh was with JDS Software and TCS. And once again, welcome to all our panelists. We'll get started with our session. Supply chain sustainability delivers business value. It reduces cost, spurs productivity, and in some cases, drives returns. Today, our key objective is to debate and discuss on the future of the supply chain, including the role of technology and innovation in removing vulnerabilities, promoting resilience and sustainability within the supply chain. With that as the context, we'll first go to our first question, and I will ask Kapil to share his thoughts on how pandemic is changing the customer behavior at large. What are the changes that needs to be done from a logistics standpoint to cater to the changing customer behaviors and trends?
I think pandemic has definitely changed the consumer buying behavior. More and more consumers are shopping online. Interestingly, e-commerce took, even when it was growing pre-pandemic, it was growing fairly aggressively. What it doubled in, let's say, 3 years' time, we have seen the same trajectory happening in just 12 months post-pandemic. And that's why we are seeing fundamental changes in the consumer buying behavior. Today, the consumer is more demanding. So like 1 day or 2 day delivery is a norm now, which puts a lot of pressure on the supply chain. Interestingly, we've seen that if a delivery happens beyond a day, and if there is a day's delay in delivering that item, the chances of an RTO increases by 3 times. And that's why it puts pressure on brands to ensure that they're able to deliver faster to these consumers. Second, we have seen phenomenal growth in the tier 2, tier 3 towns. Consumer demand has gone through the roof in these areas, and because of which brands are now putting up centers, setting up logistics supply chain, catering to this demand. In fact, we've seen tier 2, tier 3 towns growing more than double of the demand growth that we've seen in tier 1 towns. In fact, we've seen warehousing demand actually go up a lot in towns like Coimbatore, Ludhiana, etc. It's actually increased 10 times in towns, let's say Coimbatore, Ludhiana, etc. And a lot of it is driven by e-commerce now. And because of which the logistics has become more hyper-local and omni-channel. And the brands have to take care of the logistics strain on that. So the workforce has to be trained accordingly. They need to understand how e-commerce deliveries need to happen. a lot of warehouses which were actually designed for B2B operations have to be now fundamentally changed for item-based picking, for ensuring that they're able to cater to customer orders. And more importantly, have to put in technology to give visibility till the last time, because as I said, that the consumer is becoming more demanding. The third thing we are seeing is emergence of new sectors in e-commerce post-pandemic. Sectors like FMCG, personal care are demonstrating 100% plus growth over last year. And their supply chains are very different from sectors which pre-pandemic dominated e-commerce, which is fashion and electronics. And hence logistics is also getting impacted because of that. So these are the three trends that we have seen from our experience, changes in the consumer behavior, which are impacting the logistics, and brands are tuning their supply chains to be able to cater to this new era of consumer demand.
Awesome. Thank you, Kapil, for that. And yeah, definitely we all need to focus on where the customer demand is. Santosh, how about Blohan? What are you guys doing to specifically to cater to the needs of change in customer behaviors?
Yeah, thanks, Balu, for the introductions. I think safety and hygiene is one thing that has become prominent in the post-pandemic era. There are safe deposit boxes or contactless deliveries. Hygiene is sort of treated as a first nature, and that is where I think the customers, the consumers expect us to make contactless deliveries possible, and the whole thing where there is absolutely no contact that has to happen. That's one thing. The second thing I agree with Kapil is on the shift of buying patterns. I think people are going more hyper-local now. What was expected to be delivered within the day, same day, now should be delivered within a couple of hours. That is the kind of expectation that the consumer has. And faster deliveries and reliable deliveries is what will sort of bring sort of consumer experience to a better thing. I mean, if you have to build a relationship with the customer, it's not just by the brand anymore. It's also through the consumer experience, how we want to sort of make sure that goods reach him on time, and all of that has to happen. The third aspect is about supply chain transparency, where the customer actually now expects the whole, internally you may want to do sort of inter-hub movements or whatever, but he wants to track the goods live. So contingency management has to be cannot be suboptimal anymore. So that is also one thing where I think consumer is sort of expectations behind. And the final thing is about personalized user experience, where consumers have to be treated differently depending on what sort of demography or what you want to serve, and all of that is happening. And there is a preference of wallets over cards, and there are new things that we need to sort of adapt to understand how the consumer wants to behave. Because logistics is primarily, especially in the B2B sector, is a very hard cash industry where the cash moves, and that trend is shifting now. We can see paperless invoices and all of that coming, and the logistics has to sort of adjust to cater to this. I think that's my take.
Yeah. Great insight, Santosh. I totally agree with you on the safety and hygiene. As a consumer, that's definitely on my mind too. And Sanjeev, specifically, what is Udaan trying to do to actually cater to the changing customer behaviors?
Hi, Balu. Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Privileged to be part of the panel. So I think Kapil briefly touched upon the changing customer behavior, and Santosh also talked about. I want to talk a few more things specifically to the B2B side of the world that we saw. So one of the things what's generally happened is working capital is actually constrained for these guys. So what you see is a lot more recurrent orders, but small ticket orders. And this shift is fundamental post the paradigm. Much more frequency, but very small ticket orders. Second thing is there is adoption, but at the same time, if you see, the options are quite a lot. So there is less loyalty. People will shift very easily from platforms. But counterintuitive to this, because there is a lot of uncertainty, what customers are looking is a lot of reliability on communication and delivery. So they want to ensure that if the delivery has been promised, it's coming to me. There's a lot of anxiety, is he going to get the stuff or not? Obviously, there is a lot of new types of products and suppliers which everybody is willing to try. So a lot of products which people were not willing to touch earlier, there is actually demand for those kind of products. And this is also true with the fact that the same issues are on the supply side as well. So if you see on the supply, overall supply is actually less reliable, both on the on-time and full side. So what is meant for us, as I talked about, much stronger communication to the customers. And what we've also done is a lot of continuous reinforcement of what's happening. Even if there is a small delay, we keep on communicating around that, ki aapka saman 2 ghante baad aayega and all, because there's a lot of anxiety. If you don't communicate, he actually ends up calling the call center. The second thing is, I think this small ticket and more repetitive items is almost a fundamental shift in the behavior. And this is just coming from the working capital constraints. So what it is actually meant for us is much more stronger focus on efficient last mile planning, on the beat planning, how do we do it and all, because this is fundamentally changing the load economics completely. And because of the uncertainty, what it is definitely meant for us is a lot of business continuity and redundancy. Now, it manifests itself in terms of the capacity buffers we have because there's a lot of unreliability. It manifests itself in the inventory replication. So previous to this, you could think this would probably come from not the nearest warehouse, but a warehouse probably, let's say 25, 30 kilometers away. But given the uncertainty, what we've actually started doing is a much closer inventory replication tool. So basically, largely much stronger communication, planning for those really small ticket orders, and then a very strong continuity and redundancy in our supply chain.
Interesting thought, Sanjeev. Definitely, resiliency seems to be the way to go. I think the small ticket items go a long way. Totally agree with you. Rajiv, how is Walmart handling the change in customer trends?
Thanks, Balu, and privileged to be on this panel. I'll just talk a little bit about what we are experiencing in multiple of our markets, right? And it's fairly similar to what we've experienced in India, but the context is a little different. Customers are expecting deliveries to happen literally on demand, which essentially means we're moving from next day, 2 day to same day to slotted to actually literally on demand deliveries, right? And we've seen significant adoption of on demand customer facing propositions across multiple markets. The basket sizes have fluctuated through this time. During the beginning of the pandemic, we literally saw basket sizes becoming very large. Customers buying in panic, right? Which now has smoothened out, and customers have gotten back to the normal buying patterns. However, the basket sizes are starting to shrink significantly now, and they're purchasing things a lot more frequently. That's number one. The second trend that we are essentially seeing is customers wanting to purchase online and pick up at curbside. So some of them want items delivered to their home, but a lot of them also want to pick up at curbside. And we're seeing that trend grow in most of our markets. Curbside pickup, curbside return is seeing great adoption because it is extremely convenient for customers to essentially park their car at a parking spot, have the item put in their trunk, and for them to drive away. That way, they save themselves the hassle of either waiting for their item at their home or the item being at their doorstep and them not being comfortable with that given the kind of merchandise that might be. That's the second one, right? The third customer behavior that we are seeing is all essentially about wanting to have mixed baskets, right? Customers now are not looking at their shopping experiences as an everyday buying versus or grocery and low involvement buying versus buying something which has more involvement like a fast fashion, etc. what they are doing as they go to their apps is in one basket or in one order, they would want to purchase grocery and then also add a couple of apparel items or sporting goods or games, etc. Right? That's essentially how the behavior is changing, which essentially means that we need to be able to assort the items right. It's no longer about a grocery fulfillment center or a grocery warehouse and a general merchandise warehouse. You need to be able to have everything from a single source if you want to service the customer with the minimum number of packages or have everything delivered to them together. So assortment and making sure that the assortment from a hyper-local point of view, right, within a 10, 15, 20-mile radius from the customer is very local, meets the needs of the population there, and hence you can serve them through a single delivery. So these are the trends. This is essentially impacting the entire supply chain, whether it is the distribution part, where how do you move inventory very close to the customer, whether it is managing inbounds from the vendor and the challenges that we face on OTIFs, and how do you make sure that you're getting the right kind of inventory so that you can move it in the right manner to the last mile, or it is in general capacity constraints and choke points we are seeing on certain transportation lanes because of this very high volume of merchandise moving either in parcels or less than truckloads across the country. So these are the trends that we are seeing, and it's having a significant impact on supply chain.
Thank you, Rajiv. Rama, so specifically with the pandemic is concerned, can you please share your perspective, so specific to air cargo logistics? How has it impacted the business?
Sure. Thanks, Balu, and great to be here. I think I was just kind of mesmerized with what Rajiv was saying, and playing consumer, I went through some of those things in terms of experience of ordering things at Well and where we are. In terms of air cargo, I think the changes that we are seeing is there is a lot of freight movement at the expense of passengers, right? So we are seeing a lot of aircraft being converted from passenger to freight. So the downside that we were seeing on the passenger numbers coming down was almost actually a proportional increase or more on the cargo side of it or on the freight side. So we were kind of inundated with a lot of cargo movements, e-commerce, thanks to people kind of shopping, not going out anywhere. And I think Sanjeev or Rajiv mentioned earlier that there was a lot of consumer hogging, where you want to kind of, the basket size were larger. You want to ensure that you are packed as much as possible. You don't know what's happening. So I think we kind of were party to it in terms of ensuring that the movement happens seamlessly, people get their stuff and ensuring. In fact, we were at a very interesting intersection in terms of not only the consumer e-commerce logistic movement, but we were also doing a more critical vaccine distribution in the country. And we had to ensure that some of those things, the challenges are, it has to be temperature controlled, it has to be end-to-end monitored in terms of IoT, in terms of track and trace. And it is so much hypercritical, right? I mean, both things were equally important for us. So I think there were new challenges, but I think a lot of people kind of learned faster. And there was this, set of commentary that we have been kind of hearing for the last, few quarters. A lot of the digital technologies or experiments that were on the shelf were fast tracked in terms of really kind of, the rubber not only met the road, but the rubber kind of started moving on the road. So I think a lot of the tech kind of, we saw hyper accelerated adoption. And I think a lot of new things, I think we kind of just moved a lot of 10 years journey in a compact 1.5 years. I think that's the silver lining for me, if at all, in this entire last 2 years that we have to take off.
Yeah. Thanks, Rama. And excellent. I mean, I think a pandemic has definitely taught each of the organizations, each one of us, to do the business in a different way. But more importantly, speed and agility is the center of it. Each company has made their own adjustments and actually able to meet the need of customer trends, right? Which is great. Moving on to the next question, Sanjeev, we'll start with you. According to you, what are the top 3 changes that has happened to your logistics operations post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think probably there's definitely more than 3, but okay. So I think one of the first things which as I reflect, I think if I just look at our whole BCP and control tower playbook, I think that has become a lot more dense. It is in terms of the number of exceptional situations that you thought you would encounter and we are actually encountering. It is about a very long duration of this exception. So consistent supply shocks, consistent labor supply shocks, which we actually saw earlier part of the pandemic, where complete warehouses were, the entire staff had to be isolated sometimes. Parallel to this, I think the BCP script has also become highly localized. Certain pin code would actually get shut down. So how do you actually deliveries next day there? How do you prioritize across this and all? So to me, I think the first thing is really a much denser BCP and the control tower playbook, as we call it. Second facet, somebody briefly touched about it, is safety, right? And I do want to specifically talk about COD because COD has been very integral play to our business. With the COVID safety protocol, I think that's been one facet we have to actually continuously work on, that how do we actually make delivery in a safe way, especially given the nuances of COD. At the core of it has been the decoupling of our money flow and the goods flow cycle. Now, luckily for us, we also have a credit platform, so that's actually helped us. It's also meant more and more digital payments adoption in supply chain, which has kind of made the reco part a little more interesting and complex. I think the third thing, again, I want to talk about is a lot of redundancy which is built. This is a part of BCP, but what's also meant is the whole inventory placement strategy. We've actually had a complete rethink on what are the nodes, where all we replicate, how do we actually ensure that we are able to fulfill the customer demands in these needs. I think broadly, this is around the strengthening of our control tower playbook, a lot of redundancy, especially on the inventory replication and processes, and decoupling of the payment and the goods cycle, which is largely centered around how we deal with COD.
Awesome. Okay. And again, it goes back to the principles of like resiliency, like how do you keep doing the things that we're trying to do. Awesome. So Rama, specifically in your organization, how are we handling this? How are you handling this?
I think for us also, like, as Sanjeev mentioned, I think some of this business continuity thing has obviously become super critical. And I think it has changed for the better. I think we are now able to respond spontaneously to some of the challenges that are thrown. And I think, I don't think we had a challenge of what Sanjeev had, like COD, which is, I just kind of, it's just so hard, like the both ends of, the COD making to happen and all the contactless thing. I think on our side, we obviously embarked big time on all things contactless in terms of processes, in terms of flow, movement of people, movement of cargo and stuff like that. And all the other processes, as much as possible, how do we kind of, and it kind of dawned on us that some of the things were actually redundant when when push came to shove. We kind of found that some of the things could be avoided or could be done better or could be done later, and made it much more simpler, much more efficient, and much more safer, right? So I think safer or safety took the paramount importance, or took the first place on the podium in terms of the processes, and the other thing kind of, rightly so slided behind. And those were obviously lot of obviously mandate, but I think learnings as well, doing it right. And now it has become part and parcel of how we operate, of how we do our businesses. So I think for us, it was about learning. I don't know whether the hard way, but it was obviously need of the hour, and a lot of positives that we kind of have taken from this set of changes. So I think that's for us.
So Rajiv, given the complexity of Walmart and its supply chain networks, what do you think are top 3 challenges?
It is very similar, Balu, to what Sanjeev and Rama called out, right? If you look historically, retailers have always tried to have a very lean supply chain, right? They have spent a lot of time in perfecting the entire distribution model and also the fulfillment model. What the pandemic taught us is that the variation is so high that agility also becomes very important. And that's an oxymoron, right? I mean, being lean and agile both together. So there were some very interesting lessons on for us on how to convert a lean supply chain or continue to be lean, but also start to become very agile, right? And I think Rama called this spontaneous and those kinds, but I mean, very similar. We had to look at agility. We had to take decisions, and which we continue to do today, right? Supply shortages continue to happen. They're a lot less than during the initial days of the pandemic, but given the growth in business and how the consumer demand has gone up, supply shortages has necessitated that we work very, very closely with our suppliers. The concepts that Sanjeev talked about of control tower, collaborating very closely, getting early signals in terms of disruptions and taking decisions based on them are becoming more and more important for us, right? So that's number one. The second one is, as business has grown, we've added a lot of people and very quickly, but still business is growing at a much faster pace. So how do you use technology to ensure that you can scale non-linearly and you don't need as many people, right? So there are 2 or 3 aspects to this. The first aspect to this, obviously, is to maximize the current potential of your network. And you do that by using voice, computer vision, data, etc., right? How do you make it much easier for the fulfillment operator to do their work? How do you reduce the amount of walking they need to do or the movement they need to do with the forklift in the warehouse to do what they need to do? How do you make it easier for them to build pallets? So these are things that become very important to ensure that as you're adding inexperienced workforce, or as the work pressure becomes more, you're elevating some of these things and making it much, much easier through the use of technology. So that's the second. It's all aspects, right? Whether it is in transportation, last mile, every aspect, how can you use technology to make this happen? So that is the second part of the journey that we've taken through the last year, and it continues. The third one, and which is the very interesting one, is how do you decouple yourself from any choke points? And these are not supply chain choke points, right? These are technology choke points, right? So how do you move into an architecture that doesn't get obsolete, right? How does it stay current all the time? How do you get yourself into a paradigm where you don't depend on a particular hardware vendor for your devices that your associates use? How do you give them some amazing experiences without attaching yourself to a very, very hardwired device strategy? Because as we keep moving, as global supply chains, we saw the Suez Canal experience, what it has done to some of the hardware industry and all of that, right? How do you get yourself away from all those risks and make sure that the technology platform you're building for your logistics teams allows you to elevate those risks? So that's the third area that we got a lot of learnings and we moved significantly forward, right? So those are the 3 things, Balu, among the many others that I would say Walmart has worked on, and we're seeing results based on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Rajiv. And a couple, how do you think your organization is handling the top 3 changes that in the post-pandemic? Yeah.
Sure. So us being a technology platform, so it was our clients who were directly impacted by this, but we've seen some fundamental changes happening in the ecosystem. One, I think we've seen more and more brands going direct to consumer, like large FMCG brands, for example, Imami, Marico, ITC going direct to consumer. And we've seen like more and more websites getting created, and we've seen much higher growth on the website. So websites have grown 3 times faster than the marketplaces. Obviously, marketplaces still have the lion's share of the overall e-commerce volumes. That meant that they had to take care of the logistics themselves. With marketplaces, all these things are already taken care of by the marketplaces. But when they are selling on their own website, they had to take care of the entire experience. And as the consumer as I mentioned, it has become more demanding. Post-purchase experience became paramount, particularly if you're selling on your website, because you promise certain things. It's the brand essence that you're delivering. So if the delivery experience doesn't match to that brand essence, I think somewhere the customers feel cheated, and as the customer is demanding, and Sanjeev also mentioned that there is lesser loyalty, they will shift to others. So I think that's one big change that we saw. Second is particularly post-pandemic, since the footfalls in the stores were far lower, we saw a lot of fashion brands actually going fully omni-channel. Omni-channel has been a buzzword for the last 5 years, but we finally saw it in action actually being adopted. And a lot of these stores were converted into fulfill dispatch locations. And even when things became normal, they saw the benefit of actually continuing with the omni-channel. The store staff also got used to it, which was the biggest roadblock before pre-pandemic. And finally, what we've seen, as we've seen higher growth in tier 2, tier 3 towns, we have seen much more collaboration in the ecosystem. I think brands are going after logistics providers, logistics aggregators have thrived in this, and they're actually offering a lot more efficiency there. Brands are tying up with third-party fulfillment centers to be able to meet the increased demand in tier 2, tier 3 towns. So I think these three are the broad areas where we've seen brands actually adjusting their supply chains to meet the demand post-pandemic.
Yeah, that's actually very refreshing. Like, organizations coming together to common purpose, which is to serve a customer, right? Which is the most important thing. It's a very refresher in that sense. And Santosh, how is Blowhorn handling these challenges?
Yeah, Blowhorn is a full stack logistics company. So we do APIs, we do technology, and then the process. What we have seen is because of the pandemic, the number of API integrations that have increased via different platforms is humongous. I mean, earlier, a lot of things used to happen offline. We did not have sense of the data that we are moving, but now customers are willing to share more data because they want the whole visibility to be possible, and they want to share data for them. So that's one definite change we saw. Second is increase in the no-code or low-code platforms. Take different vendors where the developers don't have to do anything. I found an idea, I prototyped it, I want to sort of put a website and then share the data with the logistics partners, and I'll be able to sort of test it out by themselves. Thereby, the third thing, which is the demand forecasting, has changed, because earlier we used to do cardinal point analysis or get the seasonal demand, and based on that we used to sort of aggregate the supply and statically resource allocate and have a little bit of buffer to sort of support more operations. But during the pandemic, for surprising lot of handicrafts and the brands which we never thought actually would sort of tie up with us because they had their other own channels, they saw that there is a nice network that is getting built of logistics. Why don't we take the product out of to the new user base as soon as possible? So that sort of helped. So these three things changed the way we used to operate. We are now more data oriented and sort of look at how many new customers want to come, what is the user persona, and things like that. That has changed.
Great. That's actually a perfect segue to our next question, and we'll start with you, Santosh. Moving closer to us from an Indian context, like how has technology and digitization helped for a faster and effective reach to customers, especially in the hinterlands?
Yes. The first thing that is happening, I think one thing is the moving out of non-metro cities, tier 2, tier 3 expansion, is the supply augmentation, right? There is a rise in gig or part-time workers, right? And these users are actually nuanced. Earlier, making a delivery partner user app used to be a challenge back in 2013, 14 when they started. But now you see online KYC is sort of mandatory because there is nobody who wants to collect the hard cash or like your documents and things like that. So different learning platforms have come to train these drivers, multilingual nature, because you have to serve different parts of India, and not all part understand English. The semi-literate users, the UI user experience that we build have changed. It doesn't have to be very much. It has to be sort of more graphical in nature. And definitely, that's one thing. The second thing is there were technologies like QR code or RFID that were only in sort of restricted to either warehousing or transportation. That no longer is the code. We also had some problems because of the oxygen concentrated donations people weren't able to track. So we used a simple QR code mechanism to sort of build out a platform for people to help, right? And with a lot of RFID, whether passive or active IoT data coming along, the velocity of data increasing, I think people have sort of adopted. Another aspect is about multi-route optimization. I think sustainability, if you want to maintain, then it may not be always wise to assign one driver to sort of make one delivery, right? We want to sort of deliver 50 orders in the most fuel efficient, whatever manner, EVs or whatever. So route optimization, AIML also sort of in play. And I think customers ask, why did it take you 2 minutes more or 5 minutes more? It's come to that, right? It's no longer logistics is the last part of the thing. Finally, I would say partnerships have increased over competitions to ensure that the whole logistics network is built, and that's a good change in the startup space, at least.
For sure, I think from a demand perspective or an expectation perspective in the last mile space, customers are very well equipped with like what technology can do, and it has really become a real-time supply chains. Awesome. Couple on the same front, like how is technology helping do the transformation at Unicommerce?
Yeah, I think you mentioned about particularly in the hinterland. So what we've seen, consumers are particularly in India are getting more and more digital savvy, and we are seeing that getting reflected in businesses wanting to do automation. In fact, Santosh mentioned that businesses are now more open to experimenting with data, sharing data. There is more collaboration. So I think what we've seen is brands and companies actually investing more in digitization to be able to give more transparency to the end consumer. We've seen, like in our context, we've seen order management, warehouse management, automation within warehouses getting implemented at a much larger scale now. And warehouses also becoming larger to be able to cater to that demand. So I think that's one trend we are seeing. Second is thanks to the consumers becoming more digital savvy, we are seeing newer models like social commerce and conversational commerce actually becoming more mainstream. So conversational commerce was more meant for handling support queries, but now we are actually seeing transactions happening through WhatsApp, like models based on WhatsApp with the likes of JioMart, and even like large brands who are on our platform like Bestseller, TCNS, which have brands like W Aurelia, actually experimenting with these and getting a connect established with consumer. So that I think is becoming a big shift, and now imagine for a brand this becomes very complex, right? They have to cater to consumer through multiple channels. So consumer has always been omni-channel, right? But today the brands also have to become omni-channel and make sure that they're able to offer consistent experience. And that's why their adoption of technology has become much higher, so that they are able to, one, understand the consumer in a holistic way and to be able to serve that consumer. And third, I think I agree with Santosh. We've seen much larger collaboration in terms of both data sharing and processes, physical operations, as well as technology being more collaborative. That we've seen we act like a middleware and now have 150 plus integrations. So we've seen actually more and more platforms becoming more open to sharing. I think these are three things that we have seen in our experience so far.
Awesome. Sanjeev, like, how do you think Udon is leading this in the technology space and the transformation and powering the business?
For us, our pyramid actually was completely inverted from the B2C e-commerce. A lot of our demand comes from not only tier 3, like tier 4, tier 5 cities. I think at the root of it, if we just take e-commerce building blocks, right? Selection, pricing, and product quality, the fulfillment experience, payment and finance, and the returns, right? I think if I just break into this microservices, right? A lot of it there is appetite for selection and its pricing. I mean, that's a given, because for customer, you're giving him choices. I think the core question on selection and pricing was the trust on the selection. So what we've tried to do is try to build a very native catalog, which gives very rich information about the product itself, because you're coming into a market where there are physical samples. So for example, when I talk about agri products, the kind of information we get on the catalog is, ye dal kis tarah ki hai, kitna moisture hai, and all that stuff, right? I think that resonates with the buyer because that actually is a proxy for him for the quality of the product. Kapil talked about the reach of the delivery partners. I think what's also been important is how do you actually work with these delivery partners? Because in the end, the fulfillment experience is controlled by you. So I think what has helped us there is very, very simple apps. I mean, we've largely stayed away from complex 3PL integrations on the small delivery guys. We've given them very simple apps where they update the delivery information. Similarly, if you see, a lot of our sellers are also in smaller cities. So if you see the seller panel is extremely simple. I mean, behind it, probably yes, in the state machine, there are 12 statuses, which all of us like. But for the processing for the person there, a lot of it is pivoted on the simplicity, whether it's delivery partner, whether it is the customer, and whether it's the seller. The third axis has been a lot of simplicity on our returns and customer support processes. So for example, we also do credit. So the verification process is actually native. We have an AI bot which helps the customer with the verification process. Similarly, the returns process is actually quite streamlined because that's actually we core to the trust. So largely, if you ask me, we've largely pivoted ourselves on simplicity axis. And given there is a lot of reach of 3PL players already, there is a lot of appetite. I think that's what the axis we have written on.
I mean, very rightly, aptly put. And I think the discovery seems to be one of the key important things. And as you rightly said, having rich catalog for the customer assortment is one of the very important dimensions. Thank you for that. Rama, how about what's happening at GMR in the technology space?
I think technology always gets all of us, especially me, pretty excited. And I think I heard commentary on API, so I think there is a daily discussion on anything to do with REST, HTTP or SOAP, right? And I think that's the world that we live in, which is good for all of us. I think the technology pieces are the easy ones, right? I think it is for people to come to the table in terms of exchanging data between each other for the larger good. I think it has started, but I would kind of, like to see much more of that. I think there is still a lot of hesitation in terms of people really wanting to kind of open up for the larger benefit. I still see a lot of legacy kind of, holding back people of like processes, or this is how we did it, or we have not shared this data, or why would you need to kind of know this? Because this seems to be my proprietary thing or whatever, right? Whereas there's nothing proprietary about it. So I think there is still distance to travel for people to kind of, share information unless it's really business critical or something which is very close to you, right? But having said that, I think the tools are there for the taking. For us, the challenge has been on the travel, aviation, especially cargo side. A lot of the systems that we use are pretty archaic. There's a lot of legacy on it which has not changed, and they do not have API interfaces, and that kind of shock a lot of us that you are selling and we are buying. So now that has kind of put a lot of thoughts in motion in terms of we are starting to kind of build that product ground up. For everything about as an air cargo player, how do you get all the stakeholders together? How do you simplify? And I think I go back to the last thing that Sanjeev was mentioning. I think it is today simplicity tops everything else. I mean, don't kind of load people or bore people with all the features that you can think of. I think today for product managers, it is about few things, get the 80% thing right. Okay, keep it simple and do it today if you can. So I think that kind of is a change from when we were kind of doing a lot of complex products like a decade back. The second thing, we have embarked on RPA, which we kind of put it on back burner. So today a lot of processes are like on steroids getting automated because we want things to be faster. We want things to kind of not have any manual intervention and focus on core and key businesses. The other thing, obviously, in classical cargo setup, everything to do with track and trace, IoT, understanding the state of affairs in terms of how the goods are moving, ensuring all the parties understand. I mean, for us, it is about everybody from truckers, freight forwarders, customs, all the people which are on regulatory compliance side, all the people who are on shipping side on one side and receiving people who have to anticipate what is kind of coming in when. So I think we are now trying to kind of overhaul this entire thing in terms of visibility and also taking advantage of blockchain so that all the stakeholders are seeing the same source of truth. And everybody, there is nothing to kind of go back, ask. And somebody was mentioning earlier, I am doing this so that people don't call my like support call center or what you have, but people are seeing it from a single pane of glass. If I have to use the CIO lingo. So I think we are in a time and age where we are like really using technology to the hilt. Lot of things have really fast forwarded and accelerated. And as somebody coming from technology background, I think I'm kind of really liking what we are doing. And I think we have kind of traveled, a long distance in the last 1.5 years. Hopefully, we don't go back to the old model. We continue the speed and continue to kind of do good on those. Yeah.
Well put. Actually, there is a renewed commitment, right? Whether you build software homegrown or whether you are leveraging existing vendor product, I think the commitment to the technology or building, ground up certain things or that core experiences has become an integral part of every organization, irrespective of the size of the organization. So I totally share the same sentiments. With that, I think Rajiv, a lot has been going on, especially in the tech space for Walmart Global Tech. I think anything to do with building business products to building platforms to now we're talking about commercialization of the software, right? So tech seems to be taking a very pivotal role. You want to share your top of mind what's happening in that space?
Yeah. So continuing on this theme, right? I mean, Walmart, when we start looking at our stack, especially on the supply chain side, what we realize is two things very clearly, right? One, we probably have one of the largest supply chains in the world. We have one of the largest private fleets in North America. We have a large network of distribution centers, fulfillment centers, and all of that, right? And now technology, everything that everybody called out, right? Whether it is a microservices-based architecture, using technology that increases trust, visibility, etc., keeping it simple, multilingual, all of that, right? Is only going to allow you to bring in more partners into your ecosystem. It's also going to allow you to provide to the ecosystem, whether it is our sellers or in some cases, even our partners who are not selling on our platform, the ability to take advantage of both our strength in the overall supply chain processes, our breadth of network, and that's all enabled through technology. The other thing so what we're trying to do is completely untangle, and we've done that to a significant extent, right? Completely untangle and make everything extremely modular, right? And could be microservices, could be modular, but net everything is a very atomic, bite-size service that can be consumed by anybody. So there is something that a last mile gig driver can consume. There is something that a seller who wants to sell on Walmart and use our warehouse for warehousing and our transportation for fulfillment can consume, right? So all of this is allowing us to actually grow our ecosystem very rapidly. Given where we are, obviously now our ambitions are much more, and we've recently announced that we're going to externalize some of this IP and get into either partnerships or get into agreements and have others take advantage of our IP and build better supply chains, right? So that's essentially what we are working on. The only other thing I'll call out is our focus on automation, right? And the ability to control automation, human interaction, and orchestrate the whole network seamlessly is also taking a lot of mind share in the organization, and a lot of time and effort is being dedicated to look at how all of this will come together to serve our customers.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Rajiv. And Rajiv, we'll start the next question with you, which is direct to consumer is emerging as a business model of late. And how is D2C changing logistics in Indian scenario? And what will be the impact, according to you, for the intermediaries in traditional supply chain model?
Yeah, so I think that, I mean, we're seeing that all over, right? I mean, if you read newspapers, what you see is direct to consumer is gaining ground. I think what it is going to do is it is going to create a lot of value for the end consumer, right? Because what it allows the brands to do, and there are a lot of brands, mid-sized brands, who are trying to take advantage of the technology, of the aggregators who are helping them essentially reach the customer directly, who are helping them with consumer data to take the right decisions in terms of the changes in their product placement, pricing strategies, and all of that, right? Some of these smaller D2C brands probably cannot do this, but there is a set of startups, there's a set of aggregators that are emerging very quickly who are going to provide these services to these brands and allow them to become successful. And from a consumer perspective, obviously, then it opens up the consumer to a much, much wider choice. Distribution potentially may become almost a commodity. So far, distribution, whoever controlled distribution and was able to reach the last mile was able to control that value chain, right? If distribution starts becoming equitable, then it starts to look, opens it up to where, with the use of data, even smaller brands can take advantage and grow significantly. So that's what's going to happen. New set of intermediaries, new set of aggregators who provide value both to the consumer and to these brands are going to spring up. And they may be asset-light model, asset-heavy model, but that's what's going to happen.
I mean, this is definitely I would say, the new emerging trend. Any one of the panelists want to have a perspective on this to share?
Santosh here. So D2C is definitely something which is coming very often now, because the brands are going solo, right? They have already either they're emerging or they're somebody who is established, and they don't want to get into the standard distribution channels, right? They want to build their own supply chains. And this is not easy, because there is a nuanced customer experience now that I think as a D2C brand has to sort of cater to. So this can be done via partnership, where there is already a supply chain player who sort of understands it, and you can just sort of focus on your brand and put it across. If you try to do the supply chain yourself, then probably you will lose out on the key role that you play, that making the right product and putting it out to the customer. But that's definitely an emerging trend, and it will coexist with the standard channels. Right? It won't sort of replace the existing ones.
That was very interesting.
I think one
I'll make a point. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Apple. So I think D2C is a fairly old model, right? I mean, Dell kind of just started it many years back, right? I have a slightly contrarian view, right? I mean, I think a lot of times you have to kind of go back to what your competencies are. Are you a product or are you a platform, right? I think a lot of consumer brands, their strength has been product, really. Whereas if you see, the end-to-end customer experience not only entails selection and its pricing, there is fulfillment. There is a very core part of payments and financing, which these intermediaries do that today. There is a part of returns, which is like probably the most complicated part in the value chain. So I think while I do understand there is a trend to put up a website, I think we have to figure out who will solve for the remaining problems, right? And traditionally, if you see, platforms came for this need, right? There is an aggregation play, somebody has to do the bulk break, somebody has to solve for the returns play, somebody has to do payments, financing. So I do see that trend, definitely. I think there is interest, but I don't see it, the world is going to be either or. It's going to be, yes, there are going to be some supply chain aggregators who make it big. There are some credit players, but I still see the need for a layer who will stitch that experience right now, whether it's a platform, and I'm using the word platform very liberally. I don't see this becoming bipolar key. D2C is now the dominant model going forward. Sorry, a slightly different view.
Yeah. Well, it's a more practical view, I guess.
And I kind of relate to, in fact, I was also going to make a similar point. I was going to draw a parallel from the omnichannel world, right? And pre-pandemic, the fashion brands thought that online and offline are segregated. And post-pandemic, the role of the store kind of evolved to cater to both walk-in customers and online orders. Similarly, the distributors in the FMCG supply chain who are trying to become direct-to-consumer, I think they are not going to go anywhere. Their role is going to be evolved, and a lot of FMCG brands are kind of exploring today that can my delivery start to happen from the distributors. It'll take some time, but I think what we saw in the omni-channel world for fashion brands, I think a similar trend in the FMCG or beauty segment, I think we will see in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
And as Santosh mentioned, that both these models will coexist. I don't think it's either or. I also agree with that.
Totally agree. Yeah. So with that, we've come to our last question. Rama, we will start with you. I think because most emissions in the retail sector lie in product supply chains rather than in stores or distribution centers. Actually, it is imperative to build a sustainability in actually no supply chain network. Can you share like your experience or thoughts or ideas in building, what would it take to build a sustainable supply chain?
Sure. I think today, supply chain, as we know, contributes at least to 2/3 of sustainability issues, right? If you look at both the multi-tiering of distribution that sits behind. In fact, if you look at scope 3, it kind of calls out in terms of indirect sustainability attributes that gets added. And today, I think there is a lot of maturity in terms of people understanding the relevance and importance of sustainability, why it is important, and why today we need to kind of focus on some of those attributes. Most of the companies have their own SDG goals and visions that they go abide with, and it's no longer like nice to have. It is almost like a must have, and aligned to it for all the right reasons. So there is a lot more interest, there is a lot more alignment, and there is an ask from both the customers and your customers, suppliers, to kind of ensure that you have a good sustainability story and model.
Awesome. Okay. And Sanjay, what's your take on building the sustainable supply chain?
I think, obviously, I don't think this is not an option. But I do want to talk about, I think a lot of times sustainability discussion kind of tend to become a fad, right? I think where it comes at it's at the core of your supply chain design. If you have the right network, if you do optimized picking in the warehouses, if you plan your line hauls and back hauls correctly, if your vehicle planning on the last mile side is actually precise, is multimodal, I think more often than not, you are creating the foundations for sustainability. Yes, obviously there are trends on the packaging, the EGVs and all, I think, which naturally the momentum will shift in that direction. I think everybody will, it's only a question of when they will adopt it. But to me, the core of that sustainability goes into your supply chain design. If you try to address it as a separate theme, I think that's when it tends to start becoming a little troublesome. So to me, it goes to the design, core principles that you follow in the design of a supply chain.
Okay. So Rajiv, like Walmart has very audacious goals in this building sustainable supply chain, and it's also commitment is giving back to the community in one form or the other. So can you share a little bit more details on how Walmart is handling this?
Yeah, so we're doing multiple things, right? But I'll start by saying that I completely agree with Sanjeev, right? Which is with evolving time, there are more options available now in terms of moving towards sustainability. But even within adopting, whether it is green energy in our stores or our warehouses, battery powered vehicles, whether within the warehouse or even our tractors, all of that, right? It's all starts with the supply chain design. So all those audacious goals we have taken are based on both the ability to take technology which is a lot more greener, but at the same time be rooted into the core principles of supply chain, which is the right design, moving things in as much truckload as possible to as close to the customer, and then doing the break packs and moving it through the last mile. So doing as much as you can to minimize consumption of energy, and that is going to take us far. So very true. What Sanjeev said, which is supply chain design and working through it is very important. And then adopting what's available in terms of green energy and all of that, as more and more of that is becoming available to ensure that you're becoming carbon emission neutral. And we've set very high standards for us for 2030, 2040, and we are on track to achieve that.
And Santosh, I think, like what Sanjeev said and like what Rajiv saying, a simple transportation optimization technique can actually go a long way, right? So how are you thinking about, how is the organization thinking?
Yeah, it's like the growth of internet in India, right? It started off with 3Gs, 4Gs in the cities, and then we had GPRS over the shorter things, right? The density of the internet started growing, and that is when I think things started becoming sustainable. And that's the sort of journey we are undergoing. There will be more short haul opportunities where there is a vehicle going, there is a load that you can sort of put it in and then make sure that it gets dispatched. And that way you are sort of not reducing the waste and all the other extra transportation, etc. So that's one thing that's going to be there. And it is generally the concept of this 3Ps, right? Profit, people versus planet. So if something is like a food or a medicine, a pharma thing, that has to be done hyper local within 1 hour, do it. And if it is something like which can be sort of waited for the end of the day, and you can sort of club and batch things together and then do it for a sustainable thing via EVs and other things. I think we'll have to do something for the planet, and think that will work a long way.
Awesome. And a couple, again, it has become a forethought and an afterthought, and it's not an option, as like Sanjeev said. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think most of the panelists have covered things about the supply chain, what sustainability needs to do, and it's not an option anymore. Adoption of EVs and warehouse processes, logistics processes. I think beyond supply chain, even in the products, we are seeing sustainability becoming an important differentiator. We have seen D2C startups like MyGlam, MCaffeine actually having vegan beta certified products, and millennials are now actually looking for, not just globally, but even in India, we're seeing more and more interest in products which are more sustainable and have sustainable supply chain. So I think it is becoming a differentiator, not just in the supply chain, but also in the products as well, as we see.
Thank you. And we've come to the end of our session. I think it was very insightful and knowledgeable session from our panelists. Just to reflect on the conversation, we are going through a once in a lifetime pandemic scenario which has shaped newer consumer behavior. Our panel has given great insights on how to be agile and nimble in building resiliency in supply chain, leveraging technology and digitization. We also had some interesting observations on the emerging D2C trend in India and how logistics is adopting it. Climate change is one of the greatest challenges of our time, right? It is a mandate. It is not an option for anymore, right? For all of us to take steps towards building sustainability in our supply chains. And on these lines, Walmart has now set a path towards becoming a regenerative company. We are targeting zero emissions in our operations by 2040 globally. These goals are ambitious, and we will need innovation and infrastructure to get there. To conclude, the key takeaway from this discussion is that to build a resilient supply chain, the focus should be on agility, speed, through emerging technologies, and a commitment to sustainability. And it has been a great session for me, a lot of insights. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. And with this, I think we've come to the end of the session.
Thanks, Balu.
Thank you.
Thanks, Balu. Thanks,
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.